Things in the NHL standings, they're getting tight. Fantasy hockey standings, even tighter. That's why you're tapped right back into your daily source for fantasy hockey, NHL news, and betting breakdowns. It's the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast, Wednesday edition, taking you to the top, baby, with all of the news from around the league that you need to know. Kirill the Thrill, the Leafs, and everything in between. Let's get this paper.
You're Locked On Fantasy Hockey, your daily podcast on fantasy hockey.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You heard the music, and you know what time it is. It's time for your daily 30-minute source for fantasy hockey news. It's the betting breakdowns that you stay for on the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast. I'm joined, as always, by my esteemed co-host, Mr. Steele Roden. On this side of the microphone, it's your boy, Big Flip Livingstone. Shout out, salute, much love, and thank you so much to the everydayers making us your first listen every single day. We see you, we appreciate you, and we couldn't be doing the pod without y'all. Steele, this Minnesota Wild Toronto Maple Leafs situation warrants some attention, and not just because I'm going to be in the building tonight watching these two teams live. I don't know if you'll be joining me. We'll get to that. However, when major players are returning or going out of the lineup, you and I are going to talk about it. And in the Minnesota Wild's case, which we'll get to first, I need to know what you think about what this is going to mean for this team down the stretch, because that will have fantasy fallout. I'm worried about him, Steele. Let's talk about him. Anthony Stolarz, John Tavares, Matty Nyes. Lots going on with the first-place Toronto Maple Leafs. Warrants our attention as well. And if we have some time, we've got a mock trade that Steele and I have been talking about a lot off air that we want our listeners' input on. Big trade for Steele, perhaps. We'll get there. Big-time bets. Over to you, my friend. Kaprizov. We know he's been dealing with some injuries. Sounds like he's going to be on the shelf for a minimum of around 4 to 6 weeks. Not a season ender, but close. Over to you to what you're seeing here, because I'm concerned, my friend. I'm really concerned.
Well, first, I'm still waiting to hear through family if I can grab those tickets for tonight's game against the Minnesota Wild at Scotiabank Arena. If not, I might have to hit up Game Time, last-minute tickets. Some good deals out there with Game Time, so make sure you're checking that out. But, yeah, this is some tough news for Kirill Kaprizov and the Minnesota Wild. He's already missed 12 games this season. Fantasy GMs out there have been shedding tears all year long. Kaprizov out of the lineup, and the fact that this comes now out minimum 4 weeks, it could be longer than that because he's undergoing surgery for a lingering lower body injury. It's difficult. So for any GMs out there, it's tough. Obviously, you're stashing him on the IR. You're not dropping this player. You just got to hold and hope at this point. He's missed 12 games in the season so far. Minnesota Wild, the team overall, has gotten by okay without him. They're 6-5-1 without Kaprizov in the lineup. It is pretty good. Obviously, you don't want to see your superstar get injured, but it is good timing for them and for him to get this surgery now, obviously before the playoffs come around, but especially with the Four Nations face-off scheduled from February 12th to the 20th, it gives him some extra time to regroup, rest, and rehab this injury that he's going to have surgery on. On top of that, the Minnesota Wild are ranked 20th for the toughest schedule remaining on the season. So it's a pretty good time for Kaprizov to deal with this scenario and situation. Personally, I think Bill Guerin has a lot of work to do. I think he's going to do everything he can to address this issue.
I agree.
He's going to be franchise is going to be buyers at the deadline. Get some help in that top six forward group. Obviously with this potentially being most likely being Marc-Andre Fleury's last season in the National Hockey League, you want to swing for the fences. You want to go out with a bang. And I'm not saying just because of him, you're doing it for the organization. You're doing it for the fan base as well. I think Bill Guerin's going to be a lot more. He's going to be more aggressive than he has been the last couple of seasons at the trade deadline. One name that really sticks out to me is Brock Besser. His name has been rumored and mentioned a lot. He's a Minnesota boy. Hometown return for Brock Besser would be crucial for this team to be, considered real contenders in the playoffs, getting in that top 6-4 group, playing with Matt Boldy, Joel Eriksson Ek, whoever it is right now. So that could really be a dangerous top 6 group if they were to make a trade like that. Also get Kaprizov back from injury. With that being said, again, for fantasy GMs out there, it's just a tough blow for your team, especially if you're in a top position right now. If you're in the top 5 and you're battling, not having him in the lineup is going to hurt tremendously.
Fantasy wise, immediately you're going to have to get creative. Waiver wire Mondays, Sundays, whatever it is in your league are going to be critical right now. If you're in one of those leagues where you have auction dollars and you're within striking distance, and Kaprizov has been one of those guys that over the past few weeks you've had to be patient with, I would say splurge a very good chunk of what you have remaining to try and fill this gap. Because as much as he started so hot and cooled a bit, Steele, he was tied for second in the league in goals and fourth in points with 50 points and 23 goals prior to getting hurt on that 12-game absence. We know the duo of Kaprizov and Gustafsson were really key to getting this team off to such a hot start. I know they're still lurking in third. Let me get this out here. I think that this could be potentially crippling to the team on the ice, real life success, but I don't think that's actually as important as it's going to be for, I think it's going to be much more important for the team success. I have some faith still in the young players' fantasy value.
Yes.
Woll has been good. Marco Rossi has been good. So I'm a lot more concerned about what this actually means for the team in the standings, just because you hit the nail on the head with what this team needs to do. It's the first thing that I thought of when thinking of the Minnesota Wild. Bill Guerin, I know, has some cap space to work with. They should be buyers. Brock Besser, to me, does he replace a Kaprizov? Of course not. That's not what the move is about. It's about bringing in a little bit more of a wrinkle to a team. Let's be honest. We can be very, very forthcoming about the fact that they have lacked that killer punch on offense. And after Kaprizov, it gets pretty thin pretty quickly. And let me bring that up, Steele. I think they're sitting right now 19th in NHL overall scoring, 146 goals scored. And you know how I feel about power play numbers as well. Not good enough on the power play. 22nd ranked. And I'm intrigued to see what they do tonight against the Toronto Maple Leafs, a team that has had its troubles somewhat containing power play units. However, the Minnesota Wild here, Steele, this time of season, this time of year for fantasy GMs, get creative. I think invest heavily in perhaps swapping out a player for Kaprizov, because you know what also wouldn't shock me? If this team continues to hold down that third spot, Steele, and they do pretty well without him, they will not rush this player back whatsoever. They will make sure he's ready to go for playoffs, bring him back with 1 or 2 games left in the regular season, perhaps, if things go slow, and make sure that he's good to go in the playoffs. And that is something you'll have to keep your eyes peeled on as a fantasy GM, because I could see it happening.
Yeah, the big thing right now for Minnesota is they just got to tread water. They got to get by. They can't sink whatsoever. They got the Colorado Avalanche nipping at their heels currently.
Yes.
They're 2 points back. Besides that, in their own division, you've got the St. Louis Blues, who are down 12 points. Like I said, I don't see them making the playoffs or making any noise in the second half of the season. So if they were to drop into a wild card spot, you still got the Canucks, you still got the Calgary Flames also right there. So for me, they got to get by with Kaprizov. Like I said, it's the perfect time with the 4 nations coming around in the next couple of weeks. And again, like I said, Bill Guerin, I think, is going to be very aggressive this trade deadline in trying to establish the top 6 forward group as a deadly weapon, help on the power play, help 5-on-5, especially when they get Kaprizov, their superstar, back. It's for Gustafsson, you talked about Gustafsson. It's been a little bit rough for him lately. Sure. He does get that 4-2 win over the Chicago Blackhawks. The last 5 games, every single game was below an .890 save percentage. He was struggling, 5 straight losses. So just to get some confidence back against Chicago with a big win helps his fantasy value and helps him regain some of that confidence he had early in the season. But like I said, they really just got to tread water and get by without their superstar.
100%. And in terms of that schedule, something that fantasy GMs at this time of season are extremely tapped into. I see a lot of questions on the channel about scheduling. This is where it's about to become very critical for the Minnesota Wild ahead of the break in February. Sens, Bruins, Canes, and Islanders. And then when they return from the break, Steal an opportunity to perhaps to really turn it on. Red Wings, Utah, and then some other easier teams. However, Nothing's really easy at this time of year. That's why you're tapped right here to the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast. We're going to keep bringing it for y'all every single day, 30 minutes in and out, because we know life is busy, my friends, and we'll wrap every single show with big-time bets. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel Sportsbook, where you can be placing those bets. There is no better spot than FanDuel. Just ask my boy, Mr. Roden over there. You might as well call him Mr. Parlay. The Super Bowl, it's here, baby. 59, one game, two teams, endless possibilities, and there's no better place to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. Predicting the first touchdown, calling the MVP, or even who wins on that coin toss deal. You know, I feel about those degenerate props. FanDuel makes it easy to get in on the action with live betting all game long. Get your adjusted picks in right as the game unfolds and feel the thrill from kickoff to the final whistle. Live betting makes you feel involved in the game no matter what happens on the field, and the app is super easy to navigate, knowing right now that you can place a $5 bet and potentially get $200 back in bonus bets on the Super Bowl. Icing on the cake, baby. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. $5 down and you win $200 back in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Visit FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of Super Bowl 59.
And thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Pod your first listen every single day. Flip and I appreciate all that love and support. Make sure you're sharing with your friends and family out there. Hit the subscribe button, the follow button, leave a 5-star review. We appreciate all the comments on Twitter and YouTube. We try to get back to you as soon as possible. Just again, we love the feedback. We love the opinions and statements out there. So continue to do so. We appreciate it. Mm-hmm. We also appreciate the big news, good news for the Toronto Maple Leafs. Anthony Stolarz and John Tavares nearing return from their injuries. Right. Obviously, Stolarz hasn't played since the injury in second week of December 12th, I believe. So big news for them to get these two guys back sooner rather than later. Let's talk about what this means for Joseph Woll's fantasy value and what you might expect from when Stolarz comes back and actually gets back into game action.
Yeah, funny enough story. A close friend of my dad's is actually making music right now with Joseph Woll. I haven't told you this story.
No, he's not.
She's a singer. No, it's a she. She was at an event and she was approached by Joseph, introduced himself as Joseph, and asked her if she'd like to make music. So
no way.
100% not a fabricated story. I don't know how I could even make that up. And look, goaltenders in the NHL, like this is a bit of a sidebar, but it plays right into Joseph Woll. And this is a take here that I haven't spit at you, but you can spit something back at me because fantasy-wise, I've been invested in Joseph Woll. He's been a very frustrating fantasy piece because at times he looks like he could win the Vezina. And then at other times he's hurt or that he's letting in muffins. It's been a very up and down situation, kind of like the month of January for the Toronto Maple Leafs overall. At times, Joseph Woll has looked cerebral, like we like to see, sensational, lights out, making a ton of big saves. Saturday night was that case. If not for him, that one could have gotten really out of hand, in my opinion. I think, given what we've seen overall from Joseph Woll, which I'm going to say, yes, mixed bag, but I'm going to give him a passing grade of perhaps while Stolarz has been out. I'm going to give him a B-, I think is fair. A lot of people might go lower, some might go higher. But what I'm trying to say is, Steele, with Stolarz coming back from this injury, something that's clearly been a bit nagging because he was supposed to be back sooner, and what we've seen from Joseph Woll, I'm not ready to just throw the number one title right at Stolarz for a guy that, yes, headed into his surgery, was second in goals against with 2.14 and second in leading the NHL in save percentage at 927, not taking anything away from how good he is. This Toronto team's in first place. They have to be smart about this. So I think there is still some value here in Joseph Woll, especially over, let's say, the first week and change until we really see what Stolarz is like. But I don't think you should just jump ship on Joseph Woll just yet. You're going to have to be careful here because as much as I like Anthony Stolarz to come back and get a very good look to return to the cage and do what he did best, I don't think it's an absolute lock that happens right overnight. He's going to need some time.
No, I don't think so either. And I don't think anyone wants to jump ship on Joseph Woll at this point in the season. Like you said, the Leafs have to be very aware of overworking Stolarz, especially with an injury that he's been dealing with in the past, dealing a lot with, like you said, he should have been back a little bit sooner, but has had trouble with it. So the fact that he's just had his full practice participation.
First full practice,
And didn't leave. He was there for the full workout. So that's good to hear as well. Joseph Woll currently rocking a 907 save percentage and a 2.67 goals against average. He's already over a career high for games played and goalie starts this year with 26 on the season.
Yep.
Again, I think these are two goalies that it's really 1A, 1B at this point.
I agree.
You have a goaltender coming back from injury. You have a goaltender who's been a little bit inconsistent at times over that span since he's taken over the number one job for Stolarz. So I think going into the postseason, going into the end of the regular season, it's a 1A, 1B situation where they could really just rotate for the remainder of the year, giving those guys, like they did pretty much at the beginning of the season, and just giving guys, the confidence, giving them action, making sure they're not getting, especially with Stolarz, you want to be a little bit wary, but two goaltenders who have been really solid. Stolarz, even though he hasn't played, still remains top 3 in save percentage and goals against average. Fantastic when he's been in the lineup, obviously. So big news to get him back in the lineup. I don't think anyone's going to jump on Joseph Woll or jump ship on Joseph Woll.
Appreciate
also, that. In that same sense, John Tavares comes back into action. He's been fantastic for them. Obviously, a very weird injury, to say the least, happened in practice, got locked skate to skate, I believe, with Chris Tanev, goes down with what seemed to be a groin or a hamstring injury, maybe a knee injury, but he comes back. He was outside with them at their outdoor practice as well. A big day for the kids, having them out, enjoying them.
Yeah, I love that.
In practice as well. But two returning stars for the Maple Leafs. It's crucial at this point in the season. Like you said, they are in first place in the Atlantic Division.
Can't beat a little ODR, outdoor rink action. Steele, look, John Tavares, after everything that this man has been put through, injury, news, media, fantasy, everything, 42 points in 44 games. And I know his last 3, he had gone silent before getting hurt. This is a fantasy relevant player on a very good Toronto Maple Leafs team. And that's what I was going to wrap up about both goaltenders on the Leafs. And there's a lot going on here with this roster. And there's going to be impacts almost every few days here while players return to the lineup as such. And as much as people like to throw a lot of shade at the Toronto fan base, and some of it for good reason, I guess, don't overlook the fact, just because you don't like the Leafs, that there is a lot of value to be had here. And guys like you and I have been talking about on the waiver wire, like McMahon, like it's not all bells and whistles and roses here. There's going to be some negative impacts for players returning. Tavares returning to the top 6. I'm reading Pacioretty's going to be back. The lineups will be shuffled. Craig Berube is not scared to shuffle up these lineups, and that goes all the way down to the blue paint. So John Tavares returning, big news for fantasy owners that own John Tavares. But almost more importantly, and that's what I wanted to kind of wrap up this segment by saying, and we'll get to big time bets. I think we can probably save looking at some of these trades for later in the week. We got a few other trades that Steele and I will break down from our leagues. I got a keeper dynasty angle to take a look at, Steele. We'll get to that. 20 goals, 22 assists for Tavares in 44 games, chipping in with 55 hits as well. There is nothing to say about how good he has been this year. So when he comes back in, do I say he's going to return just like we're talking about OV and Matthews getting shot out of a cannon? No, but it's going to impact some of those peripheral pieces, number one, and keep an eye on what the value is going to be with a guy like Tavares, who is at 34 years old and might need a couple of games to get settled in. So lots going on with the Toronto Maple Leafs. Keep your eyes peeled. Lots going on with the Minnesota Wild. If you're invested in teams where the lineups are shuffling, Steele, this isn't rocket science. Turn on some alerts, tap into some pods. If you're within striking distance, it's do or die time.
Do or die. Still tons of value on this Leafs roster. Still tons of value with big time bets, which is coming up after the break. 5 games on the schedule. Flip and I are going to break down our top 3 favorite picks for Wednesday. But first, this episode is brought to you by Game Time. If you're like Flip and I and love going to events, whether it's sports, music, theater, or comedy, then Game Time is the app for you. One of my favorite memories was attending a concert and games last year. The energy, the excitement in the building, it's almost unforgettable. Now, Game Time has made it even easier to get tickets for your favorite events with their new feature, Game Time Picks. This feature filters out all the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. recently. I was looking for tickets, like I said. If I can't get them through family, I'm going to Game Time for this Leafs Wild game. I'm finding amazing deals and could even see the view from my seat before buying. The super deal was particularly impressive, offering great seats at unbeatable prices. Plus, the app's all-in pricing shows the total cost up front with no surprise fees at checkout. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app and create an account. Use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time. Thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Pod your first listen every single day. We couldn't be doing without all of our listeners that show up Monday through Friday, 7 o'clock in the morning is when you can find our episodes. Share with your friends and family out there. Like I said, it really does mean the world to Flip and I, seeing all the support we get from our listeners, helping you win your weekly matchups in fantasy leagues, helping you put some extra cash in your pockets with these big-time bets. And that's what we're getting to right now. 5 games on the schedule, Flip. I don't know about you, but once again, this is a little bit of a weird situation for me. I wasn't a fan of a lot of these games, so I went with the same game parlay with my 2 favorite teams tonight, Minnesota Wild and the Maple Leafs. So I got a same game parlay from there. I don't know about you, but where are you looking? Do you have a same game parlay, or how do you feel about the other 4 matchups?
Definitely a tricky little board. When I looked at it, I had to really dig into it a little bit. And I actually have a number of different picks. And one of the first ones that I'll just, if you want to say, call it honorable mention, I believe you mentioned to me the other night, and I'm just going to really defer to a lot of what you've been doing because you've been cooking there. This under in the LA Florida game, it's sitting at 5.5, but I like it at 6.5 because I'm just a little bit shook daddy and I can add it into a parlay. That's my first honorable mention. I really like the under LA Florida going under the number at 6.5. Take this in. The number has gone under in 9 of 10 Florida home games. They play suffocating defense at home, and I think that's what you're going to see. So that's my first pick. Let me hit you with my second, and I'll turn it over to you because this is going to segue nicely. I like the Leafs on the money line here. So maybe there's a side bet cooking. I know Kaprizov is just one man, but at this point in the season, having your number one guy who just came back 3 games in, this is going to hurt, especially when the rest of the team that has to pick it up, Brock Faber, Rossi, Boldy, these are all really young guys, and I'm not going to poo-poo them. But going into Toronto's barn, I know it's not always rocking. The Leafs are 7-1-2 in their last 10 against the Minnesota Wild. Hit me with the Toronto Maple Leafs on the money line, especially because I'm going to be in the building. That's my first actual pick of the night.
No side bet. I'm right there with you. Kaprizov's out of the lineup. This is, like I said, they have the 20th toughest ranked schedule remaining for Minnesota, but it starts off very tough without him after this injury against the Maple Leafs. So I'm right there with you. Maple Leafs on the money line at -176 currently. The Leafs have won 7 of the last 10. It actually could have been 8 out of the last 10, but a 2-1 loss most recently in this last matchup between these two teams. I'm with you right there. Maple Leafs on the money line, first pick, -176. Same game parlay for me, so I'm just going to rattle off all 3 picks. Matthews anytime goal, -115 is my second pick. Before the Sens game, he had 8 goals in 8 games. And I was, very taken aback by Craig Button's comments about Auston Matthews being a legitimate superstar, not being as good as Leon Draisaitl, especially the fact that it came after that Sens game where, he had a bad game. The Leafs had a bad game. They struggled in their own zone, but I think it was uncalled for, blatant disrespect. And again, when you look at the overall numbers,
totally different players as well.
Totally different players. When you look at the stats and the overall, the production so far this season, Leon Draisaitl's played 50 plus games. He has 30 goals and 40 assists, something along those lines. Matthews has played 15 less games than him, and guess what? Has 15 less goals. If he's in the lineup for all those 15, he's right there in at least the top 5. Top 5 for points this season. I thought it was disrespectful from Craig Button, so I'm going.
Thank you for getting that out of the way. We owe Craig Button on that one.
I had to vent a little bit. Matthews anytime goal -115. He's been lights out, obviously.
For the brand.
Third pick, Leafs Wild over 5.5. This one's a little bit of a coin toss. I like the over 5.5 in this situation. -114, like I said. Whether it's Gustafsson or Marc-Andre Fleury, they've been a little bit bad over the last 2 to 3 weeks. defensively anyways. And without Kaprizov, it makes it even a little tougher on them. I think Matthews is going to come swinging. Nylander, Marner, of course. The top six forward group, I really like. Bobby McMahon, like you've mentioned, is getting some great production up there on that top line. That's the same game parlay. Lock of the night, Matthews anytime goal.
I think I got a sprinkle on the Auston Matthews anytime goal. By the way, I just peeped my seats while we were just there at break. I'm sitting in the second row, not lower bowl, but upper bowl. And I know I'm not going to be down there with the fancy peeps like the rodents, but it's going to be a good game. And I hope we can get in the barn because the Leafs need this one. And, you know, I didn't get to this in our Leafs segment, but I'll spit it out quick. I don't think we've seen the best hockey from the Toronto Maple Leafs, which I think is actually the most exciting part of what I'm seeing from this team. We haven't also seen them healthy. They have been a banged up bunch. There has not been a complete group playing together. So I'm intrigued to see what they do in this second half. And I think it's got to start against teams like that they've done well against, like the Wild, and the Wild are a bit hurting right now. So let me wrap this up very quick. By the way, that was credit due to the Roden family. Just got to say, get that in there. Vancouver, Nashville. This is sitting at 5.5 for some reason. I think a little bit because of the historical head-to-head numbers are right down the middle. Last 10 games, 5 over the number, 5 under the number. This one screams over to me between the Vancouver Canucks and Nashville Predators, a team in the Preds that have been, aside from their last game against the Ducks, really feeling it offensively, putting up crooked numbers. We spoke all about that. And even when they lost against the Ducks, the number went over the total. So second pick of the night, hit me with the over 5.5. I would have taken it at 6.5 too. So over 5.5, loving it. And let me finish it off with a little player prop about a player that we haven't spoken about. 3 goals, 2 assists in his last 5 games in Steven Stamkos. Steven Stamkos is picking it up a little bit here.
Yes, he
5
is.
game-winning goals for Stammer this year, by the way, in 48 games, doing what he does best, starting to shoot the biscuit. The shots on goal headed into the last week way down. 105 shots so far, and last year, 262, which was near career highs. So I was expecting more rubber on net. And what has he done over the last couple of games, Steele? Exactly that. Back-to-back games with 4+ shots on net. He's got a couple of threes in there. So I'm going to like this number hovering around 3. He's got his confidence back, and he's a shooter. Lock of the night, Stamkos. 3+ shots on net. I think the Preds get theirs against Vancouver. I think Stammer gets his. Hit me with my lock of the night along with that over in the Canucks game with Stammer, 3+ shots on goal.
I do like the player prop 3+ shots on goal for Stammer. I would also take the under 6.5 in that Kings-Panthers game, suffocating defense, like you said. Other than that, the other matchups, money line, over-unders, little difficult to say between these 5 games. So I'm sticking with the same game parlay, but definitely liking the Stammer 3+ shots in that game against the Canucks. Those are the bets. Those are the lock of the night. Thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Pod your first listen every single day. For your second listen, make sure, once again, you go check out the Locked On NHL podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. From both Flip and I, we wish you good luck with your weekly matchups. It's crunch time, baby. Good luck with your bets tonight, and we shall see you back here again tomorrow.
Peace.